Chapter 17, from 1824 to 1836, Section 6. Attempts were made in the county of Cornwall to form a collegiate institution for the education of youth and the advancement of science in 1826. It was proposed to erect buildings, to govern the college by a directory of patrons, and to establish a public library and lecture room. For these purposes, a fund was contributed. 24 persons subscribed £5 each on the spot. A commencement was made at Norfolk Plains, but the project failed and sunk into a private academy. In 1828, the government determined to establish a school at New Norfolk, called the King's Grammar School. The members of the government were the Board of Guardians. The master was in holy orders. This effort was also frustrated. Such attempts were not, however, lost. They were in reality not only the pledges but the causes of final success. But the establishment of the King's Orphan School in 1828 was successful. It was chiefly designed for the numerous children whose parents were unable to support them, who had deserted, or who were dead. It was placed under the guidance of a committee and afforded protection to many children who must have sunk under the influence of a vicious example. In this island, the fatherless have found mercy. In the absence of natural ties, the settlers have often displayed a parental tenderness in educating the children of the outcast and the stranger. The public institutions which multiplied at this period tended to mitigate the spirit of party. In 1826, several master tradesmen met to project a mechanics institute. In 1827, they called a meeting of the inhabitants, who, having chosen Mr. Gellibrand their chairman, organized the institution. The governor was invited to be patron, the Chief Justice was chosen president, and Mr. James Wood appointed secretary. Dr. James Ross, called the Birkbeck of Tasmania, delivered the first lecture on July 17th on the science of mechanics, the second on astronomy by Mr. Gellibrand, Sr., Mr. Hackett on steam engines, Mr. Giblin, Sr. on astronomy, and Dr. Turnbull on chemistry completed the course. Mr. James Thompson gave lessons in geometry to a youthful class. These efforts languished during the absence of the secretary in Great Britain, but in September 1829, the former lecturers reappeared. Contributions were increased, and a library and apparatus were obtained from England. In 1830, 200 members were enrolled, and the institution was promoted by all classes of society. Among its supporters, Dr. James Ross occupied the first place, a man whose name will be ever mentioned with respect. His political career does not receive or deserve unqualified praise. As a partisan of Arthur, he sometimes sanctioned by his pen what it is difficult to vindicate, but he contributed to the intellectual advancement and external reputation of the colony beyond any person of his day. Dr. Ross was the son of a Scotch advocate, educated at Aberdeen University, and sometime employed as a planter in Granada, where he became an advocate of Negro freedom. He afterwards established a school at Sevenoaks, Kent, but his family kept pace with his fortunes. He determined to emigrate and arrived in Van Diemen's Land in 1822. Some error in the shipment of his goods, upon the schedule of which he claimed 2,560 acres, deprived him of one half. He chose his location on the Shannon and called his cottage the Hermitage. Here he was vexed with the incursions of cattle, the perfidy of his servants, the dread of bushrangers, and the visits of the blacks, and he willingly accepted the office of government printer, which Mr. Bent had lost. The Courier, his newspaper, patronized by the governor, obtained a large circulation and in 1830 published 750 copies. He wrote with great facility and copiousness. In a letter to a friend, he said, "I write my articles, engrave my vignettes, set the types, adjust the press. Sometimes I set up a few lines myself and dictate at the same time to one or two of my compositors. Sometimes I write 3 lines of a sentence for one, 3 lines of a sentence for another. I teach my own children, 9 in all, at the same time that I write paragraphs. A genial spirit, except when troubled by political anger, usually sparkles in the writings of Dr. Ross, and in such case they are rather unfair than bitter. Wherever Arthur disliked, Ross opposed. He denounced the emigration of the poor, and Archbishop Whately charged him with baseness in supporting the penal system of transportation, but no colonist would question his sincerity. Dr. Ross retired from his literary labours in 1837 and not long after closed his earthly toils. In his last address to the public, he said, "Independence of spirit has been my motto, freedom my watchword, the happiness of my fellow men my object, and the truth of our religion my buckler and consolation." Such was his account of himself, and may be left as his merited eulogium to posterity. A handbill, published during the heat of a political quarrel from the headquarters of his foes, is a curious specimen of party spleen, and may be taken as the set-off to his own. Here lieth the body of James Ross, printer, formerly a Negro driver, who spent the remainder of his days in advocating the cause of torture, triangles, and the gallows. Then follow couplets, among which are these: "Beneath this sod mark, reader, as you pass, the carcass buried of a great jackass. Perfidious, smiling, fawning, cringing slave, hell holds his spirit and his flesh this grave. Corruption revels in a kindred soil, a carcass fatted on an island's spoil." An association with objects more extensive and more ambitious in organization was projected by John Henderson, Esquire, a surgeon from Calcutta in 1829. It was denominated the Van Diemen's Land Society. The members proposed to collect and diffuse information respecting the natural history, produce, mineral worth, statistics, condition, and capabilities of Van Diemen's Land. The governor accepted the office of patron of the society, and its establishment was celebrated by a public banquet. In his account of the institution, the founder and president relates that, although it enrolled the heads of departments and the most respectable settlers, he found himself surrounded by spectators rather than coadjutors, who, in the absence of selfish interests and personal advantage, could not be stimulated to toil. Dr. Henderson, whatever his science, was disqualified by his censorious dogmatism to rule. His work was an outline of projects which entered into every imaginable department of political economy and contemplated a social revolution. On religion, his ideas were scarcely Christian. He combined the Brahmin and the socialist. End of chapter 17, being chapter 3, from 1824 to 1836, section 6.